Thank you, Sandy. Good morning. It's great to see you today. If you're new here, a special welcome to you as well. I just want to do, if you have been looking for some help, maybe in your financial world, getting some advice, some wisdom, some best practices, a safe place to talk a little bit about your situation, then we've got an opportunity for you starting next Sunday night here at 5:30. It's one of the opportunities that's available to you. If you've been thinking, you know what, I would love to find my spiritual shape, figure out how God has gifted me and wired me, and maybe where I can volunteer here and kind of use the gifts that God has given me, then Pastor Kelly is going to have a group here next Sunday night starting as well. If you've been thinking, you know, I'm new to Canada and I need to kind of figure out how to navigate school system, how to buy a car, how to deal with winter, then Pastor Joe has got a group called Finding Home. And if you're looking for a Bible study, a good old-fashioned Bible study, then I'll be offering a class on the book of Amos. So what's going to happen is we're all going to come together for supper at 5:30. Come, join, sit and visit with some people, have a meal, and then we're going to break up and you can go to one of those 4 groups for 4 weeks. So stick with the same group for 4 weeks. But we want to make this an opportunity for you. It is happening next Sunday, so please register today if you're thinking of going, because we want to make sure that we've got enough seats and, most importantly, food for you as well. We've been talking about different biblical principles that help us in our own relationship with the Lord and help us grow in our faith, but also when put into practice will help transform us into the kind of person that's creating healthy relationships in our lives. Kind of our relationship with God gets healthy as it grows and matures, as we surrender ourselves more fully to Him. One of the byproducts is it allows us to have healthier relationships with the people in our lives because of the work that God is doing first and foremost in me. And we talked the first week talking about dying to yourselves. As a Christian, one of the main characteristics of a Christ follower is that we are a people who surrender ourselves to the Lord and surrender our agenda to His agenda and allow Him to do the work that He wants in our lives. And as He's doing that, we become transformed more and more into His image, which means we get better at being in relationship with the people around us. We talked about truthfulness, that as a Christ follower, one of the things we have to deal with is the truth of God, and we can't run from it, we can't ignore it, we can't hide it, and that's a great skill set too if you're in a relationship with somebody where there's some uncomfortable truths that maybe you've been ignoring for a period of time. And today we're going to talk about another foundational, really basic, but incredibly challenging biblical principle of loving others. God has called us to love others. And I'm going to maybe increase that a little bit to say this, to love difficult people. I want us to talk this morning about what does it look like to love people, but specifically to love difficult people. And I added this last part because I think this is a great area for you and I to grow in our faith. It's an issue that we all deal with. And maybe you can consider it because I know as you drove around the city this weekend, you realized we're in election mode here. This might be a great kind of primer for how am I going to survive New Brunswick elections, learning to love people, all people, even difficult people. Who comes to mind when I say the word difficult person? Who's the person in your life? If you're sitting with them, don't make eye contact. Look straight ahead. Who is it? I've got some. I know you've got some. Maybe I'm that person for you. I don't know. But who are the people in your life? It's hard to be patient with them. It is hard to be compassionate for them. They require more than the Surgeon General's daily recommendation of pain and suffering on a daily basis. Maybe they're mean or controlling or manipulative. Maybe they're people that you really, really already love. But loving them, they make it so difficult to do that. Maybe they're not intentionally mean or intentionally manipulative. They just don't know any better. They're extremely lost. Maybe they've never been taught. Maybe they didn't grow up with good examples of healthy relationships in their life, and so they don't know any better. Can you picture them? Well, if we're honest, we can all be those people to a certain extent. And in fact, if you're sitting here right now and thinking, I don't think I have any difficult people in my life, maybe you're that person to the people around you. Even Mother Teresa said, look, I can be difficult at times in her memoir. She talked about how difficult she could be to work with. So if Mother Teresa was difficult at times, certainly we can all admit that maybe we're no different. Maybe let me give you an example. A little cartoon here would help. And this is my elementary school boy sense of humor, so I apologize for those of you more sophisticated. So this is Jesus teaching to the crowd, be kind to everyone. Wait, even Gary, someone asks? Yeah, Gary's the worst, someone else chimes in. Look, Jesus says, we've been through this. Yes, be kind to Gary as well. Well, Gary's in the crowd. Ha, losers. Not now, Gary, says Jesus. Do you know people like this? Okay? This is what we're talking about. Learning to love people, learning to love difficult people. Because it's a really, really big deal that you and I, as followers of Jesus Christ, learn how to love others as Jesus has first loved us. Even the Garys in your world. Wanting this for ourselves, not just learning to do it or fake it, but actually wanting to be the kind of person who's getting better and growing in our capacity to love other people as Christ has first loved us. Now, thankfully, the scriptures are filled with advice because we are not the first people to deal with this issue. And today we're going to look at some verses found in the book of Romans, written to the church in Rome. And again, imagine like a local congregation in the empire city of its day, a world-class city, huge in population, financial center of the world, cultural center, all kinds of complications in it. And from this community of people, there's these local churches in the city of Rome, filled with both Jews and Gentiles, city folk, country folk, men, women, rich people, poor people, people that loved the nation of, or the empire of Rome, and people who hated it. And all together, sitting beside each other in church on Sunday morning. And each of them in different stages of their own spiritual formation. And each of them still kind of wrestling with how do I continue to give myself over, holding on to old ways of thinking about matters, lifestyle behaviors, and people that are different from them, all trying to become the church together. In fact, Romans is one of those books that's so theologically weighty, so substantial, so much incredible teaching in it, and yet Paul spends chapter 12, 13, 14, and 15 trying to call this community of believers to love one another. And what does that actually practically look like in their day-to-day lives? So let's read together Romans chapter 12, starting at verse 9. Love must be sincere. Hate what is evil. Cling, white-knuckled, cling to what is good. Be devoted to one another in brotherly love. Honor one another above yourselves. Never be lacking in zeal, so spiritual passion. But keep your spiritual fervor serving the Lord. Be joyful in hope, patient in affliction, faithful in prayer. Share with God's people who are in need, and practice hospitality. Let's read those words together that Paul kind of commands the people with here. Let's read these. Love, devotion, honor, zeal, joy, patient, and faithful. When you think about the people that you know who are in your life who are difficult, is this kind of your knee-jerk reaction when you're around them? I just feel more loving. I feel when I'm with them, I just can't wait to love them more. I can't wait to be devoted, to show honor, to show patience, or to be faithful to them. No. Paul recognizes the challenge that when we are around difficult people. And so he calls us up to something greater. He calls us up to live out this life of faith that he has called us to. That when someone is pushing our buttons, ticking us off, exhausting us, these things won't come naturally, so we have to choose them. We choose to be these kind of people. We choose to live this way. And in doing so, to honor the Lord. 2 weeks ago, I was in Moncton, and I was visiting with someone who's caring for their aging parents. And he was saying to me how difficult and exhausting and overwhelming it's become, to the point that he's kind of lost his way. And he said, I had to kind of have a heart check moment where I reevaluated myself. And he said this, I've decided I'm going to honor my parents. That's it. In every decision, every time I drive across town to help them with something at their house, and in every conversation, the posture of my heart, the choice I'm going to make is to honor them. How beautiful is that? But it's a choice. It's what we must choose. I think Paul, again, is saying to us, when we're dealing with difficult people, it's so easy to be thrown off our game, to lose sight of who we are and how we ought to treat people. It's so easy to get frustrated, exhausted, furious, upset, which of course is natural. to react instead of to think about how is it that God might be calling me to posture my life and my heart towards this individual. And so we are called to love, to choose to honor, to choose patience, to choose to pray for this person, to choose to be faithful. With easy people, with difficult people, with nice people, with annoying people, with people you agree with, and people who you think are just so far out to lunch, it's not even funny. Paul calls us to posture ourselves the same. And so he calls us back to the heart of God's people, and gives us examples of what this might look like. Let me just go through a few of them that he mentioned here. Cling to what is good. Refuse to let go of what is good. What are the good things in your life? What are you grateful for? Where is God working? What is going well? Let's take it a step further. What about those difficult people? Are there good things in their life? Is there anything good about this person at all? Or are they 100% evil and horrible and awful? Let me just say, when you get to that point where you can see no good in any human being any longer, it's probably a sign that there's something going on in your heart that you need to pay attention to. Cling to what is good. Keep your spiritual fervor. Watch your spiritual heart. Watch your spiritual temperature. This is not a time to become disconnected from the Lord and the Lord's people. Don't withdraw. Don't become disconnected. It's so tempting because maybe you're exhausted or emotionally exhausted and you think, the last thing I can do is go out or get together with people. But God has gifts for you in the frame of other people. And as we spend time with Him, He will dispense those to us to give us the strength that we need. Practice hospitality. Now, I don't know if Paul is saying, call those difficult people and have them over for lunch. Maybe, maybe not. I think one of the things he's saying is this: you need to surround yourself with people who will be an encouragement to you, because you're going to need it. Surround yourself with people who are gifts to you, who will infuse some joy into your life, and who can help you carry the burden, and who may even give you some wisdom in the situation that you're dealing with. Paul knows difficult people can become the center of our universe, our emotional universe. Our thoughts are completely revolve around this person. And Paul says we can lose our way, so he calls us back. He calls us up. Now, let me just make a couple of comments. Loving difficult people does not mean accepting abuse from them or being mistreated by them. It doesn't mean being with them all the time or becoming their best friend or doing what they want. It doesn't mean believing what they believe or agreeing with them or encouraging their foolishness. It's the decision to be in a relationship with them, whether out of requirement, out of family relationship, or because you're friends, and to do the heavy work of loving them. And it's heavy work. The great Russian novelist Dostoevsky tells this story in Brothers Karamazov, where there's a wealthy woman, and she asks a monk how she can know if God exists. And the monk says that there's no explanation, there's no words, there's no argument that's really ever going to convince you. You must go out into the world and practice active love. So this wealthy woman starts to romanticize, what's it going to look like if I actually go out and actually start loving people and kind of putting my life out there and doing things to show love to people. And so she imagines selling all that she has, all of her wealth, and going and living in community with others who want to do the same thing, and giving her life in service to the poor. So she's kind of romanticizing this wonderful idea. But then it strikes her. She's going to run into ungrateful people. She's going to have people who complain about the soup being cold, the bed being too hard, the bed being too hard, and the bread being too stale. And she realizes that her romanticized vision of love is not enough. At which point the monk says to her, love in practice, so actually living it out, actually showing love to people, is a harsh and dreadful thing in comparison to love in dreams. I think Paul knew this. Actually living out the gospel, actually loving people, actually doing life with people who have their challenges is not a romantic idea. It requires a commitment and an open-heartedness so the Lord can give us what we need to do just that. Let's keep reading verse 14. Paul continues, bless those who persecute you. Bless and do not curse. Rejoice with those who rejoice. Mourn with those who mourn, or show compassion to people who are grieving. Live in harmony with one another. Do not be proud, but be willing to associate with people of low position. Do not be conceited. Notice these words: bless, rejoice, mourn, live in harmony, don't be proud, be humble, don't be conceited. These are the kind of things you do when your heart is already chosen first to love, to honor, to keep your spiritual zeal, to be patient, and to be faithful. These are the fruits of that first decision. Because if you're like me, it's so much easier to say, if you curse me, I'm cursing you right back. If you mess with me, I'm going to push back even harder and mess with you. I'm 100% right, you're 100% wrong. Your life is a mess, but you deserve it. You made a mess of it, too bad. Sleep in your own mess. I'm not going to help you. That would be such an easier response. And here's Paul's fear. When we become that person, when we move in that direction, we've become like them. Paul says to these believers, do not become like them. If we're not careful, we'll adopt their rules, we'll treat them like they treat us, we'll speak to them in the same way that they speak to us. In the end, they have influenced us, and we are no longer an influence on them. In fact, it's kind of like the golden rule turned inside out. You know the golden rule? Do unto others as you would have them do unto you. Well, I think if we're not careful, when we live around difficult people, the rule can become, I'm going to do to you what you've done to me. I'm going to do to you what you have done to me. Payback, revenge. I've been keeping score, and I've been waiting to get even on you. And it looks like this. My mom was difficult to me, so I'm going to be difficult to her. My spouse is difficult to me, so I'm going to be difficult to them. Or even worse, we actually receive it from one difficult person, then we take it out to somebody else who's got nothing to do with it. My boss is difficult to me, so I'm going to take it out on my kids. Now, if you and I went out to lunch, and you told me the story about your difficult boss or a difficult family member that you've been trying to deal with, and then I said to you, oh, it's too bad that your boss is difficult. I think you should go home and treat your son the exact same way. You'd hopefully get up and walk out of that meeting and say, I'm never talking to him again, right? But the truth is, it can happen to all of us. We can lose our way. And Paul here is calling us back as the people of God to live a different way, to love as we have been loved first and foremost by Christ. Now, let me just read the end of this section, because I know for some of you, we're maybe sitting in the back row polishing your baseball bat for the difficult people in your life, or who are saying, yeah, but if you knew, and just were really kind of wound. Paul's got some words for maybe all of us here. Let me start reading at verse 7. Do not repay anyone evil for evil. Be careful to do what is right in the eyes of everyone, if it's possible. If it's possible. As far as it depends on you, live at peace with everyone. Do not take revenge, my friends, but leave room for God's wrath. For it is written, it is mine to avenge. I will repay, says the Lord. On the contrary, if your enemy is hungry, feed him. If he's thirsty, give him something to drink. In doing this, you will heap burning coals on his head. Do not be overcome by evil, but be overcome by good. Paul says two things. Number one, trust your unfair circumstances to the Lord. Again, I'm not talking about if you're in an abusive situation here or a really unhealthy relationship. I'm talking about your average kind of run-of-the-day, annoying, hard to get along with people. Trust the unfairness of your circumstances to the Lord. He's watching. He sees what's going on. And he will ultimately reconcile all these things, whether in the timing that we like or not. Secondly, if you're sitting here thinking, I really want to get revenge, but I don't want to sin, Paul gives us an option here. He says, hey, you can do something about it. He says, go and be really nice to the person who's difficult to you. And it'll be like burning coals on their head. Now, I'm pushing a little bit on this today. But let me just say, I'm afraid that the church, capital C church, not just us, are losing the ability to love the people that Jesus loves. that we're losing our ability to love our broken, sinful world in the same way that Jesus first loved us when we were broken and sinful as well. That the divisiveness that we see in our culture, the anger, the name-calling, the ease at which we just dismiss people and throw them to the curb and put them in these unredeeming categories is also influencing Christians on a regular basis. It's become so prevalent. And I think one of the opportunities that we have to put display the power and the gospel of Jesus Christ is in how that we love people. Not accept everything and do what everybody wants, but we can still love people the way that Jesus first loved us. It's an incredible opportunity. Can you imagine people being overwhelmed by how loving you are to somebody who doesn't believe the same thing as you? How loving you are to somebody who doesn't maybe have the same lifestyle as you? That Jesus can use our actions in a transforming way, in the way that his love impacted our lives. Now, some questions for us. As you think about the difficult people in your life, do you feel like you're losing yourself? If you're honest, are you becoming more like them and they're starting to influence you more than the other way around? Are they taking too much of your mental real estate and your mind and your heart, and you just need to somehow figure out how to contain that a bit and be called back to the ways that God has called you to? Are there things that you've stopped doing, groups that you were a part of that you stopped going to? You've drawn back but they were so life-giving, but you just stopped for whatever reason. Maybe today is a day to just check your heart and say, God, help me in this area. Because this is God's calling on none of us. Jesus in Luke chapter 6, 32 to 36 says this, and then I'll close. If you love those who love you, what credit is that to you? Even sinners love those who love them. If you do good to those who are good to you, what credit is that to you? Even sinners do that. And if you lend to people expecting to be repaid in full, even sinners do that. But love your enemies, do good to them, and you will be children of the Most High, because he is kind to the ungrateful and wicked. Be merciful just as your Father is merciful. The phrase that stands out to me is this: and you will be children of the Most High. That God has called us to put his love on display, to put the power of the gospel on display. Not because we're worthy, but because we have been recipients of it ourselves. Loving difficult people is not choosing the easy way, it's choosing the good way. And we can only put this kind of love on display if we're experiencing it ourselves. And that's where I want us to land here this morning. Do you know that God loves you? Like he really, truly has affection for you. No matter what you've done, no matter your brokenness, no matter your regrets, no matter your doubts, no matter your past, no matter the mess, God truly loves you today with an everlasting love. With a love that will forgive you now and today and into the future. He loves you. He's given the most precious gift he could ever give for you and for me. If you and I are going to learn to love other people, the very first thing we have to do is make sure we really get the depth and the width, the height and the length of God's love and mercy for each and every one of us. Because it's powerful, it's controversial, and it's beautiful. And the ability to turn our chaotic, exhausted hearts into hearts of peace, the ability to turn our anger into joy, the ability for that transformation is a powerful demonstration of the love of God that we can display as we let him do his work in us. So, for each of us today, myself included, I encourage that you would have the courage to kind of reflect on this and say, God, what does this look like for me? Let me pray. God, we're grateful for your love and mercy directed to us in the person of Jesus Christ. Not just for the forgiveness of our sins so that someday we can spend eternity with you, but your ongoing, relentless commitment to pour eternity into our hearts now. that we have living within us this reservoir of your mercy and grace at work in us. Lord, may it soften our hearts to the people around us. And may our lives be just a demonstration of what God can do with a broken human life, inviting others to experience the same.